The cold wind cut through the thin jacket Jamal wore as he walked down the dimly lit street, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His shoes, worn and faded from years of use, barely cushioned his feet from the cracked pavement. The streets of his neighborhood weren't friendly at night, and every shadow seemed to whisper a warning. Be careful, or you might not make it home. Jamal had just finished another long shift at the fast food joint a few blocks away. His paycheck barely covered the rent, let alone the school supplies he needed or the bus fare for getting around town. But he worked hard because he didn't see any other option. His mother, his hero, was working 3 jobs, doing everything she could to keep a roof over their heads, and Jamal refused to add more weight to her shoulders. As he neared the corner of Elm Street, Jamal saw a figure huddled against the side of a building. It was a man, his clothes ragged and torn, his face hidden beneath a grimy hood. Jamal slowed down, his breath catching in his throat. Homelessness was a reality in this part of town, but seeing it up close like this made his chest tighten. For a moment, Jamal thought about walking past. What could he possibly do to help when he could barely help himself? But something in the way the man shivered in the cold stopped him. Jamal fumbled in his pocket and felt the single-dollar bill crumpled between his fingers. He hesitated. This is all I have. But he couldn't just leave. With a heavy sigh, Jamal crouched down and pressed the dollar into the man's hand. The man looked up, his eyes dull but surprised, and nodded once in thanks. "It's not much," Jamal muttered, standing up and shoving his hands back into his pockets. "But it's all I got." As he walked away, he had no idea that this small act of kindness would set into motion events that would forever change his life. Jamal walked home that night feeling a mix of emotions. The cold air seemed to sharpen his senses, and the weight of his empty pocket pressed on his mind. That single dollar might have gotten him a bus ride or helped with groceries for the week, but now it was gone. Yet, despite the nagging doubts, he couldn't help but feel a faint sense of pride. It wasn't much, but it was something. When he reached home, his mother was already asleep on the worn-out couch, her uniform still on, and her shoes kicked off haphazardly beside her. Jamal quietly draped a blanket over her, knowing she'd be up again in a few short hours for her next shift. He sighed, heading to his small room. As he lay down on the creaky mattress, his mind raced with thoughts about the future. How long could they keep living like this? How long before his mother's health failed, or he fell too far behind in school? These thoughts kept him awake until exhaustion finally pulled him into a restless sleep. The next day, Jamal's routine continued. School, work, home, repeat. It was as if the days blurred together, one long stretch of struggle. But something changed that afternoon at school. He was called to the principal's office, a place he'd rarely visited. His heart pounded as he walked down the hallway, wondering what he had done wrong. As he entered the office, he was greeted by the stern face of Principal Lewis, who sat behind a cluttered desk. But next to him was a man Jamal had never seen before, an older gentleman, sharply dressed, with an air of authority and mystery about him. "Jamal," Principal Lewis began, folding his hands, "this is Mr. Daniels. He's a benefactor of the school and has taken an interest in our students. He'd like to speak with you." Jamal's stomach twisted with uncertainty. What could this man possibly want with him? He wasn't the top student, nor was he a troublemaker. He was just Jamal. Mr. Daniels leaned forward, his eyes studying Jamal with a kind yet discerning look. "Jamal," he began, his voice calm and steady, "I've heard a lot about you from the staff here. Hard-working, respectful, determined. You're the kind of young man who deserves a break, and I believe I can offer you one." Jamal blinked, unsure how to respond. Was this some kind of joke? Mr. Daniels smiled slightly, sensing Jamal's hesitation. "Let me explain. I was out late the other night and saw something that caught my attention. You gave your last dollar to a homeless man, didn't you?" Jamal's breath caught in his throat. How did this man know? He hadn't told anyone, and he hadn't even though much of it since it happened. "You see," Mr. Daniels continued, "that small act of kindness is a reflection of your character. You didn't have to give, but you did, even when you had little for yourself. That's the kind of person I'm looking for." Jamal felt his head spinning. What was this man talking about? And why did it feel like his life was about to take a drastic turn? "I run a program," Mr. Daniels said, leaning back in his chair. "A mentorship program for young people with potential, people like you. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a chance to join me. It's a paid internship, and you'll learn things that can change the course of your future." Jamal stared at the man, his words washing over him like a wave. This felt like a dream, one too good to be true. He glanced at the Principal Lewis, who nodded, his expression serious but supportive. "I don't know what to say," Jamal finally muttered, still trying to grasp the enormity of what was being offered. "All you need to say is yes," Mr. Daniels said, standing up and extending his hand. "I'll take care of the rest." Jamal hesitated only for a moment before reaching out and shaking Mr. Daniels' hand. His life, as he knew it, was about to change. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jamal quickly found himself thrust into a world that was foreign to him, a world of business meetings, luxury offices, and influential people. Mr. Daniels wasted no time in introducing Jamal to the ins and outs of his world. Jamal's new job involved shadowing Mr. Daniels and learning about the inner workings of his company, Daniels Enterprises. At first, Jamal was overwhelmed by the complexity of everything, from financial strategies to corporate meetings, but he was determined to make the most of the opportunity. Mr. Daniels wasn't just any businessman, he was a visionary. He had built his empire from the ground up, and Jamal admired his work ethic and intelligence. Despite his success, Mr. Daniels wasn't all about the bottom line. He often spoke to Jamal about the importance of giving back and using one's power to uplift others. As the weeks passed, Jamal began to excel. He absorbed everything like a sponge, eager to prove that he belonged in this new world. He learned not only about business but about life. Mr. Daniels became more than just a boss, he became a mentor, guiding Jamal in ways no one had before. But amidst all the success and growth, there was a lingering question in Jamal's mind. Why him? Why had Mr. Daniels chosen him out of all the other kids in the school? And what was the real reason behind this seemingly perfect opportunity? One evening, after a particularly intense meeting, Jamal finally mustered the courage to ask. "Mr. Daniels," he began, his voice steady but filled with curiosity, "why me? Why did you choose me for this?" Mr. Daniels leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as if considering how much to reveal. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Jamal, there's something you need to understand. Life doesn't just happen by chance. I didn't choose you on a whim. You were tested, and you passed." Jamal frowned, confused. "Tested? What do you mean?" Mr. Daniels smiled slightly. "The homeless man you gave your dollar to, he wasn't just any man. He works for me. I wanted to see what kind of person you were when no one was watching. That's why you're here, Jamal, because you showed that, even in your toughest moment, you were willing to give." Jamal's heart raced as the revelation sunk in. He had been tested, without even realizing it, and that single moment of kindness had changed the course of his life. But why? Jamal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why go through all that trouble just to test me?" Mr. Daniels' expression softened. "Because, Jamal, I believe in investing in people, not just businesses. And people like you, with the right guidance, can change the world." Jamal's life began to transform at a pace he never imagined. His days were no longer filled with the dull monotony of school and a minimum-wage job. Instead, he was thrust into the world of high-level business dealings, financial strategies, and leadership lessons from Mr. Daniels. He started his internship with simple tasks, managing emails, organizing schedules, and taking notes during meetings. But it wasn't long before Mr. Daniels pushed him into more substantial roles, attending meetings with influential clients, discussing marketing strategies, and even presenting small projects. Jamal found himself rising to every challenge, his confidence growing with each successful task. At first, his friends didn't understand his sudden disappearance from the usual hangouts. Jamal's new world was vastly different from theirs, and he found it difficult to explain the changes in his life. His best friend, Marcus, tried to be supportive but couldn't shake the feeling that Jamal was drifting away. "Man, you're always busy now," Marcus said one afternoon while they sat on the steps of Jamal's house. "What's this job got you doing? You barely even have time to shoot hoops anymore." Jamal shrugged, unsure how to describe the intense, fast-paced nature of his new reality. "It's different, bro. It's not just a job. It's like, I don't know, it feels like my ticket out, you know?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Out? Out of what?" Jamal sighed. "Out of this, man. Out of this cycle. Mr. Daniels, he's giving me a shot at something bigger. I'm learning about stuff that could change everything. Business, money, how to move in the world. It's crazy." Marcus gave a slow nod, but there was a hint of unease in his eyes. "Just don't forget where you came from, Jay. Some of us don't get those chances." Jamal felt the sting of those words but forced a smile. "I won't, man. I'll always remember." As Jamal delved deeper into his work, he started to see the world differently. He no longer viewed success as something distant, reserved for the lucky or privileged. With every new project, every lesson from Mr. Daniels, he began to understand that success was built on choices, strategies, and relationships. It wasn't about luck, it was about playing the game. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, Mr. Daniels invited Jamal to his home for dinner. It was the first time Jamal had seen where the man behind the suit lived, and it left him speechless. Mr. Daniels's house was a sprawling mansion, nestled in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. The wide driveway was lined with luxury cars, and the lawn looked like something out of a magazine. Inside, the walls were adorned with expensive art, and the furniture screamed wealth. "Take a seat, Jamal," Mr. Daniels said, gesturing to a plush leather chair in his study. "I thought it was time we had a more personal conversation." Jamal sat down, trying not to look too out of place. "Personal?" he echoed, unsure of where this was going. Mr. Daniels poured himself a drink and handed Jamal a glass of water. "You've been doing excellent work. You've picked up on things faster than I expected, and I see a lot of potential in you. But I want you to understand something. The world we operate in, the world of success, isn't just about hard work. It's about power." Jamal frowned slightly. "Power?" Mr. Daniels nodded. "Yes, power over your decisions, power over your time, and most importantly, power over others. The reason I brought you into my world is because I see in you someone who can handle that power, but there's a cost." Jamal felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of cost?" Mr. Daniels leaned forward, his eyes locked on Jamal's. "You have to make choices that not everyone will understand. You'll have to distance yourself from people who don't share your vision. Sometimes that includes people you care about." Jamal's mind flashed to Marcus and his family. Could he really distance himself from them? Could he give up parts of his old life for this new one? "I'm not saying you abandon them," Mr. Daniels added, reading Jamal's expression. "But you'll need to prioritize. Your time, your focus, your energy. They all need to be directed toward your future. Sacrifices will be necessary." Jamal's heart pounded. He had dreamed of a better life, but hearing it laid out like this made it feel more complicated. Was he ready to make those sacrifices? As the weeks passed, Jamal began to face the real consequences of his new world. He was rising through the ranks at Daniels Enterprises, but the demands were relentless. He missed more family dinners, skipped out on weekend hangouts with Marcus, and spent more time at the office than anywhere else. And then there was the attention. People at school started to notice the changes. The nicer clothes, the confidence, the fact that he was no longer just another kid from a poor neighborhood. Some admired him for it, while others whispered behind his back, calling him a sellout, claiming he'd forgotten where he came from. One afternoon, as Jamal walked through the hallways of his school, he overheard a conversation that stopped him cold. "Man, look at Jamal. Thinks he's better than everyone just 'cause he's working for some rich dude now," one kid sneered. "Yeah, probably doesn't even care about his old friends anymore," another added. Jamal's jaw clenched. He wanted to defend himself, to shout that they didn't understand the sacrifices he was making, but he stayed quiet and walked away, the weight of their words heavy on his shoulders. While Jamal continued to rise in his new role, doubt began to creep in. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mr. Daniels' mentorship than met the eye. Why had Mr. Daniels gone to such lengths to test him? Why was he investing so much time and energy into a teenager from a struggling neighborhood? Jamal's curiosity grew as he started noticing small things: offhand comments, secretive meetings, and occasional slips in Mr. Daniels' usually calm demeanor. One night, while reviewing some financial documents, Jamal stumbled upon a report that didn't quite add up. It was a minor detail, something most people wouldn't have noticed, but it raised a red flag in Jamal's mind. The next day, Jamal decided to confront Mr. Daniels. "Mr. Daniels," he began carefully, holding the report in his hands, "I've been going over some of the documents, and I noticed something strange." Mr. Daniels looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "Oh? What did you find?" Jamal hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There's a report here about a deal we made with a client, but the numbers don't match up with what I've been learning. It's like there's something missing." For a split second, Jamal saw a flicker of something in Mr. Daniels' eyes. Surprise, maybe, or concern, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Jamal," Mr. Daniels said calmly, "you're smart. You're picking up on things quicker than I expected. But you need to understand that in the world of business, not everything is black and white. There are gray areas, and sometimes you have to operate in those gray areas to get ahead." Jamal felt a knot form in his stomach. "But is it legal?" Mr. Daniels stood up and walked around the desk, placing a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You're asking the right questions. But sometimes you have to decide what's more important, following the rules or making sure you succeed." Jamal swallowed hard. The man who had seemed like a mentor, a savior, was now revealing a side of himself that Jamal hadn't seen before, a side that was willing to bend the rules, to manipulate situations for his benefit. Was this the price of success? Was this the kind of power Mr. Daniels had been talking about? The days following Jamal's discovery were filled with an uneasy tension. He continued his work, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, but his mind kept circling back to the conversation with Mr. Daniels. The man who had once seemed like a guiding light now appeared to be casting shadows Jamal didn't understand. Yet, despite his doubts, the lure of success and the life he had always dreamed of was strong, too strong to let go. But things began to unravel faster than Jamal could have anticipated. One evening, while working late at the office, he overheard a heated argument between Mr. Daniels and a business associate. The conversation was muffled behind closed doors, but the tension in their voices was unmistakable. Jamal couldn't make out the specifics, but a few words cut through clearly: illegal deals, cover-up, money laundering. His heart raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The strange discrepancies in the documents, the gray areas Mr. Daniels had mentioned, it was all connected. Mr. Daniels wasn't just bending the rules, he was breaking them. Jamal's first instinct was to confront Mr. Daniels, but he knew that would be a mistake. Instead, he decided to leave quietly, slipping out of the office without being noticed. As he made his way home, his mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. What should he do? Report Mr. Daniels? Walk away? Or stay silent and protect the opportunity he had been given? The next day, Jamal found himself avoiding eye contact with Mr. Daniels. He couldn't shake the growing sense of dread gnawing at his conscience. But the situation took an even darker turn when Marcus showed up unexpectedly at Jamal's workplace. "Jay, we need to talk," Marcus said, pulling Jamal aside. "What's going on, man?" Jamal asked, concerned. Marcus looked around nervously before speaking. "I've been hearing some things, bro. People are talking about Daniels Enterprises. Something shady is going on with your boss, and it's not just rumors. There's an investigation happening." Jamal's blood ran cold. An investigation? That meant the authorities were involved. It was no longer just a question of ethics. The law was closing in. I'm telling you this because you're my boy, Marcus continued. If you're mixed up in this, you need to get out now. Jamal felt a wave of panic wash over him. He had known something was wrong, but hearing about an investigation confirmed his worst fears. The life he had worked so hard to build, the success, the opportunities, was crumbling around him. And now he was at the center of it all. That night, Jamal sat in his room, staring at his phone. Should he call Mr. Daniels? Should he confront him? Or should he walk away and never look back? The weight of his decision pressed down on him, suffocating his thoughts. But before he could make a move, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. I know what you found. Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. Jamal's heart raced. Was it Mr. Daniels? Was it the police? Whoever it was, they knew. And now, so did Jamal. The next day, Jamal showed up at the location mentioned in the message, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. He was nervous, unsure of what to expect. As he entered, his eyes scanned the room until they landed on a familiar figure. The homeless man he had given his last $1 to months ago. The man was sitting at a corner table, looking much different than before. He was cleaned up, wearing a suit, and carried an air of authority. Jamal, sit down, the man said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Jamal, still in shock, sat down slowly, unable to believe his eyes. You're not homeless, he muttered, still processing the situation. The man chuckled softly. No, I'm not. But I wasn't lying about needing help that night. I was part of a test orchestrated by Mr. Daniels to see what kind of person you are. Jamal's confusion deepened. A test? What kind of test? The man leaned forward, his expression serious. Mr. Daniels does this with a lot of young people, kids from rough neighborhoods who show promise. He gives them a chance, but not without seeing if they have the right heart first. You passed. You gave me your last $1 when you had nothing to gain from it. That's why Mr. Daniels took you under his wing. Jamal shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. But why? Why the test? And what about everything else? His business, the shady deals, the investigation? The man sighed. That's where things get complicated. Mr. Daniels believes in giving people a chance, but he's not above making his own rules to get ahead. The deals you've seen, the gray areas, that's all part of the world he operates in. But now it's catching up to him. Jamal felt a pit in his stomach. So, what happens now? The man paused for a moment before answering. You have a choice, Jamal. You can walk away, let Mr. Daniels deal with the consequences of his actions, or you can confront him and try to make things right. But if you stay, know that it won't be easy. He's not going to go down without a fight. Jamal left the cafe with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. He couldn't ignore the situation any longer. He had to confront Mr. Daniels, not just for himself, but for everyone else who might be caught in his web of lies. That evening, Jamal showed up at Mr. Daniels' office. The tension in the air was palpable as he entered, knowing this confrontation could change everything. Mr. Daniels was sitting at his desk, as calm and composed as ever, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes when he saw Jamal. Jamal, Mr. Daniels said, leaning back in his chair. I've been expecting you. Jamal clenched his fists, his voice steady but firm. I know everything, Mr. Daniels. I know about the deals, the investigation, the lies. You gave me an opportunity, but I won't be a part of something corrupt. For a moment, Mr. Daniels said nothing. Then, slowly, he stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. You're a good kid, Jamal, he said quietly. Better than I ever gave you credit for. I had hoped you wouldn't find out that I could keep you on the right side of this, but I see now that you're not someone who can be bought or manipulated. You're someone who will stand up for what's right. Jamal stepped forward, his heart pounding. I'm walking away, Mr. Daniels. Whatever happens next, it's on you. Mr. Daniels turned to face him, his expression unreadable. You may be walking away, but remember this, Jamal. In this world, there's always a price to pay, and you'll have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice. Walking away from Mr. Daniels wasn't easy. Jamal had built so much of his future on the foundation Mr. Daniels had provided. But now, that foundation was crumbling, and Jamal had to rebuild from scratch. The investigation into Daniel's enterprises intensified, and soon the entire operation was exposed. The business world was shocked by the revelations, but Jamal knew the truth long before the headlines broke. Months passed, and life for Jamal was different. He wasn't living the high life anymore. No more luxury offices, no more powerful connections. But he had his integrity, and that was worth more than any of it. He had returned to school, focused on his studies, and started working a new job, this time for a small, ethical company that believed in doing things the right way. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Jamal found a sense of peace in that. One day, as he walked home from work, Jamal spotted the same homeless man on the street. Only this time the man wasn't dressed in rags. He was wearing a modest, clean outfit and had a small sign in front of him that read, "Thank you for believing in me." Jamal smiled and approached the man, handing him a couple of dollars. "It's good to see you again," Jamal said. The man looked up, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You too, kid. You too." As Jamal walked away, he realized that the true test hadn't been about money or success. It had been about his heart all along, about who he was when no one was watching and what he was willing to stand for. And in the end, that was the lesson that would change his life forever. Jamal's journey had come full circle. He had learned the value of integrity, the cost of success, and the importance of staying true to himself. Though his path had been filled with challenges, he emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Now, Jamal was using what he had learned to help others in his community. He started mentoring young kids, just like Mr. Daniels had done for him, but this time he was doing it the right way. No tests, no manipulation, just honest guidance and support. Thank you for watching this incredible story. If you enjoyed the twists and turns, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. We've got more amazing tales coming your way, so don't forget to like and share with your friends. Want to hear more stories like this? Check out our other videos and let us know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. See you in the next one.